Oh my God. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is a podcast now. Like, do something original. Well, my name's Alex, and his name's Joe. So I guess we're good, right? That was a legitimate conversation, and that was my legitimate response. This happened at the gym. What day is it? Yesterday. Um, yeah, I was saying, oh, like New Year's catch up effectively, and someone was asking me like, oh, like have you done anything new? I was like, yeah, I started a podcast, and like she rolled her eyes and gave that expression and said those words, and then like I knew exactly what she meant. It wasn't like anything, no autism needed there. I just like if you're gonna joke around to me, I'm gonna joke right back at you. And I was like, well, yeah, my name's Alex, and his name's Joe, so I think we're good. And then she didn't understand what I meant, so then I had to explain the joke, which it hurt me because I thought like that was the audition, really. And I was like, if she can volley the serve back, it's game on, you know. like,
Wait, is this a
like,
complete random stranger you
like sort of stranger, yeah. Like, do you know, there's some people who like you see in the gym and like you might nod at them. I you don't do the gym. Um, like people you see like just like day to day who you know, and you might have like a quick catch up conversation, but you never go any deeper.
met? Okay.
So like you don't know if they have kids, you don't know if they're married, you don't know if they're gay, you don't know anything about them. They don't know if you're gay. They don't know if you have kids. They don't know if you're married. But you know, you go, ah, they're nice, and they have no impact on your life at all. You know those people?
Yeah. No, I do.
Yeah. Guys, this is Silly Wales. This is a mental health podcast, and because
Oh
it is a
yeah.
mental health podcast, yeah, I forgot we were doing that. Honestly, I forgot we were even doing this. Because it is a mental health podcast, I will have to let you guys know that the topics discussed, some might be somewhat triggering. I don't actually know what we're gonna hit on today, but I'm gonna make a general blanket statement and say we're discussing education and school, which is good if you care about the school system and how we grew up in it. But if there's something that is maybe a little bit stressful for you, then by all means, feel free to take two steps to the rear and get out of here. Maybe watch a different episode. Listen to a different episode. Or because this is like our second episode, technically, you might just have to watch something else, you know, or listen. I don't know.
Wow. Okay, this is really going well. I'm liking this.
Well, I mean, hey, like you know, when we have like a whole back catalog that I could be like, hey, maybe you should watch or listen to the episode about like veganism or whatever, and then
Oh no,
see,
let's
you
not.
know, you know,
to
like,
to be fair as well, like you're the one who's who's backpacking all of this, like carrying the situation. I haven't said a word really. I've
dude,
only just I'm coming in literally to just take the mickey out of you and then fuck off. So
yeah, but I'm just trying to be good, okay? I'm trying to like not hurt people and
no,
trying
that
to be
that part
respectful, you
that
know,
part's good. I think.
like. Yeah. Guys, school is school. And if you're someone who's going through school at the moment, that means you're pretty young and you're listening to this show. And that kind of unnerves me, but also gives me hope. Because maybe something here will actually help you and you could find some relation to it. And if you're really young and you're in primary school listening to this, then I'm worried. What the fuck are you doing here?
Although
That's
this
it.
might be a very useful conversation for you. Who knows?
Do you know what? Yeah. Yeah. This episode came about because we wanted to break the show up into two different styles of things, where we do normal episode of Silly Worlds, where we discuss how we're doing in our week to week, like a journal, like what this is down as a category on iTunes, and we want to also do episodes like this where we hit certain topics and we be more direct in our approach and we have more concise viewpoints on things like that, because these are things that we know about and we have expertise in. Why? Because we lived through them. So we're talking about our own experiences and how they relate to how we are as people now. So yeah, we're talking about education. Joe, I'm gonna pass the ball to you.
Okay. So the interesting part of this is that we did not go to the same primary school. We did go to the same secondary school, but not the same primary school, not the same nursery. Samson, who we referenced prior, who was a friend of ours, I met in primary school, for example. So like that whole history goes back much further, but there's like a lot about Alex, even thinking about it, that I do not know. And literally, as we started talking about it, I was like, "Oh yeah, I went to one primary school. How about you?" And then you were like, "Oh, I went to like 3, 4, 5," and I was like, "Okay, there's clearly shit that I need to learn, and this is the conversation I want to have." Um, I think the to set an arc for me just for a moment in terms of the school system, not even the school system, I should say, but my like experience of school has like, moments in time, periods that I can like specify, which is I remember um, I went to nursery very young because my parents worked, both parents worked, and they worked till quite late. So even in nursery, I remember like, I would be there till 6 o'clock almost. So I got very good at telling the time on the clock because I'd know when my parents were coming. So I can remember in nursery being one of the only kids by the time one of my parents would pick me up, generally my mum. So quite common. And this then led into primary school with play. I was gonna say play scheme, but I don't think it was called that. I think it was called play center or something like that. I don't know what
Yeah,
if
it
you
was
had that
something like that.
version.
Yeah,
Like, but basically it was just after school, all the kids whose parents didn't pick them up would stay at the school and they would, stay there for however long. And that was without go, there's things I could be talking about in this episode, which I will absolutely not go into for the fact that I don't think it's really the right moment to do so. Um, but that had very good and very bad elements to it. I will say that aspect of school after school experience. But the truth, let's just say I wanted to go home generally as quickly as possible. Like if I could have had that, that would have always been the case. Um, and then, uh, but during that time, generally at school, I was quite happy. In fact, I really can say that I was really happy as a child, I think, for a long period of time. Probably very frustrated by a lot of things. One of those things where you realize looking back, maybe some of the things that I now think of that I have dealt with in relation to like autism, for example, when I think back and look back on moments in my life when I was very young, I realized, oh, there was a lot of frustrations and problems there that was not being understood or recognized or handled or anything like that. And I talked to my mum about this on various occasions. Nothing to do with her. It wasn't that kind of stuff wasn't as well known, and it wasn't really as like easy to get the help towards that. So and also in her defense, as she puts it, like she literally like felt the way that she thought about autism and things like that was so extreme and was so much in the like stereotypical or the
yeah,
stereotype of like um someone who like isn't even speaking and things like that. The you were that you're that wasn't me. I generally seemed quite happy or whatever. In fact, I was very social. I've always actually been a weirdly social person when actually with someone. Um, that that probably was I was probably the most social when I was that age because the world hadn't burned me at that point. But I was generally quite happy, basically. Leading up to a certain year, I think it was around. Again, I mentioned this before, like 7, 8, 9, when I started feeling depression and things like that. But I think really that didn't start happening until the moment where I think that there was a shift in the kind of social development of uh, people in primary school, of people in my class and year and so on, because I suddenly found that there was much more in the way of cliques developing, and there was more of this. I don't know about you. I always felt like there was kind of a general community feeling to the social engagement between children of a certain age, like when they're at a certain young age, where it doesn't feel quite as like it doesn't feel like there's as many barriers to entry, or it doesn't feel
Yeah,
like people are going
yeah.
to be, or it just doesn't feel like people are going to be very like negative or really opinionated towards you. At least that's my experience. I don't know if that's really like a
Yeah,
truthful claim.
everyone likes, in general, everyone, because I'm seeing it now like I've been a TA, but a teacher, I've been all that stuff now. So like I've seen it now, and it's like there's a certain age group that you hit where you have like your people, and I'll say in the UK system, it's when you reach year three, which I think is when you're like nine, no, not 9 years old. You're like 7, 8 years old, I think. Am I right with that? I'll have a quick Google check. I don't work in
Yeah,
primary school anymore, but
I
like,
mean, if that is true, then that's exactly the right number and age and year, like that I would be referring to, because to me, like it was literally in year three that I started noticing like a kind of colder isolation that appeared, and I
yeah,
think that
same
there
here.
was, I think that there was some sort of like, I don't know what it could really have been, but it felt like almost something had changed, and I felt like I was a child, like a kid, but everyone else was suddenly older. Like
Yeah,
something had changed, and I felt like I was being left behind in the social sense. And genuinely, I started becoming very internal and very um there. I was always there. I was never like I was never an asocial individual. Um, and I did very well in school. This should be something I should point out, and actually is a very interesting element in the whole aspect, specifically of maybe where we are in, or maybe the schools I went to in Hackney, or where we are in. I don't know. It's actually very hard to say. I've had thoughts about this over time. I've never had anything concrete to like take from it, but I did very well in school, which gave me a certain level of I guess maybe like status or understanding. Like everyone knew my name, which when I think about it, is very odd considering I was not a socially popular person
yeah.
in
You were
any other
social, but you
sense.
weren't socially popular, I guess.
Right. And everyone knew me because I was the smart kid. But there was no like sense of anyone knowing who I was. They knew of who I was. They knew of me, but not they didn't know me. So
Yeah,
there was that
yeah.
there's a very clear like distinction there that I experienced, and going through and going from year three on, like, oh my god, it's hard to think that like that was probably like, year three, year four, year five, year six. That's the in the UK, that's the 4 years of what's considered juniors in primary school, which is what's primary school for like Americans? Is that a thing?
Elementary school.
Elementary school. They have like a split elementary school, right?
They have like kindergarten, which is nursery. Then they go into elementary. I think there's like something in between, like a reception over here. And then after that, then you have like middle school and then high school and then
Middle school. I think middle school is
yeah.
like juniors for us, roughly. It's like close. That's the closest thing that can be described for it. But because like
But
sometimes we'll have separate junior schools.
yeah, because like middle school will be like year 7, 8, 9, I think.
Oh wait,
And
really?
then
That's that age?
yeah, I think so. I don't know. We could do a
Oh,
Google.
okay.
I was never involved in the American educational system. Only reason why I know it is purely because my family was involved in that stuff. So maybe I'm right. What age are you in middle school? So after primary school, which covers grades 6 to 8, children in sixth grade, 11 to 12. Yeah, so 11, 12, 13. Yeah, look at that. Look at me being right about stuff.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's older than I thought. So this is a young. So junior is sometimes it's purely like I don't know. It's a purely honorary sense, because like in my school there was no this I didn't change schools when I which is very common in like London. You don't change schools when you go from infants to juniors. You're in the same school for
Yeah,
like 7 years basically.
yeah,
And in certain cases, if you go to the nursery at that school as well, you're in there for like or maybe even 9 years or something like that, which when you think about it, is stupidly long.
Yeah, yeah, like it's not uncommon to be out of school for 11 years. Like if
Ye-
you start in the
Mate,
nursery, um, like if you start in the nursery, well, yeah, maybe more like 9, 10 years, you'd be like 3 or 4. But if even then, you start from there, from reception to year 1, year 2, that you don't leave until like year 6, in which point you're 11 years old. So you're spending a good, like, your development is in the same place, and it used to be surrounded by the same people, by like the idea of your peers will stay the same and the teacher
mhm.
will stay the same. Now, now that's not really the case. Teachers leave a lot more, TAs leave a lot more, students leave a lot more, and that's part of like, yeah, when I come into this, like that consistency is a problem for kids now. So like, yeah, but going back to you being in that same space for that long with like no change.
Yes, except that, like I say, there was a very obvious change of something that had happened, and I did find myself completely isolated and alone. And I remember how much of my experience of like, you know, of playtime at lunchtime and things like that, just being on my own, or literally kind of like, I don't know, like almost following people around, like just kind of being in places but not actually like engaging, because I knew that if I said anything, then I would get immediate backlash for it. Kind of just being like a fly on the wall to everything, or literally just being on my own and thinking about whatever it was I was interested in, and having weird imaginations in my brain of like completely oddball things. Um, I don't remember why, but I had this like this is just a very strong memory I have. I had a glove with like a red, white, and blue circular, almost like the RAF pattern on. I don't think that's what it was, but it just happened to be on like the palm. And for some reason, I imagined this thing could electrocute stuff. But weirdly enough, like I wasn't thinking about me doing it. I was having the idea of, I had this idea, and then I thought, oh, what if there was a dinosaur that hunted using its arms and it would electrocute its prey? This was a genuine thing I used to think about, and I used to run along a bit of the yard or playground. It was barely a playground, honestly. It's real shit. Um, and just run along there for a period. I just sprint and just imagined that I was a dinosaur, and like I struck and like striking a thing to the right of me, and then it just like in my head imagining like the Walking with Dinosaurs like scene of of this dinosaur hunting this other one. Honestly, just what it's a wonderful thing, imagination, and I sorely think that it's something that should be embraced, honestly. But I can see how even from an outside perspective, I would look weird. But that's what kids are. Kids are weird. But regardless, there was a clear thing that changed there, and I will admit that for the last 4 years of primary school, those junior years, I think I genuinely hated school. I think I wished that I would never. I wish that I never wanted to go to school. I wished that school was just a thing I never had to experience, because just the amount of lonely time that you were on, the amount of time that you were lonely and on your own. And at that point, there were a few, apart from my one friend who we referenced before, who was in the year above. So I never actually like interacted with him very easily, because there were then different. Not only was he a year above me, but there was a different clique there. Um, and he was quite popular as well in his year, or he was very well known at least. So he actually had a lot of people nearby and around him, or talking to him or whatever. I just wasn't going to be involved in that. Um, it's this like little, what seemingly is younger, although it's like only I mean, I was a few months younger than him, like technically, but
Yeah,
but he was like tall and I wasn't like that tall.
you're black.
He's a black guy. I'm like this little white kid with like long hair, or I started having long hair around that time. I had longer hair than most kids, for example, at least most of the white kids anyway, which wasn't very many. But like the very, very different, like just a weird dynamic. And not all of it I understood that way, obviously. Like there may be some internalizations that I don't quite understand, like going with that. I obviously never knew that was what was like any of those kind of like ideas necessarily. But I remember being very angry, very internal, very sad, and very depressed. Like, not that I could have ever understood it at the time, but I was genuinely depressed. And clearly, like over that time, I was, starting to what do you call it? There was clearly certain habits that would end up like developing over time, like I said, like a feeling of loneliness, how I act with loneliness, avoidance, things like that. And there's some more stuff that we'll maybe go into later on, which I do want to talk about in terms of what it is about that experience. But this is like that's the last period, I think, and then it's secondary school, and then I'm in year 7 for a little bit, and then I meet you for the first time. So
And then it all went even worse from there.
I mean, many things had changed obviously by that point, but like I'm really curious what your experience was, because I know that I just gave like quite a relatively in-depth overview of mine, but I'm really curious how yours is going to be completely different or similar in certain ways. So I'm really curious.
I don't know really where to begin, because I was trying to remember all my like primary schools. So my first, I went to nursery. I remember bits of nursery. The key thing I remember from nursery was I'm terrible at climbing stuff, absolutely terrible. But I remember climbing to the top of like these jungle gym thing, and then getting to the top and then going, I made it. And in the celebration of me making it, I stretched out both arms, put them both in the air, and like fucking Wile E. Coyote, realized midway through that I'm no longer holding on to it and it landed flat on my back. From what felt like a good old like 200 feet drop, in reality it was like a 6-foot drop. But damn, did it feel like I was falling forever.
Yeah.
And then like primary school was a mission. I went to a school in Westminster, so which is like, where's Westminster? That like West London, I guess. Yeah.
It's not really West London, but yeah, it's kind of like it's pretty much central London, but it's just like right outside it to the west.
Yeah.
It's like if Hackney is East London, it wouldn't really be that Westminster's West London. Westminster's like buttressed up to the middle, right to the center.
So like, my mom worked like had a government job. That sounds like it's really well paying. At the time, it was, but now it's nothing. It's like 55K, which like we're going 20 years now, 20 plus years. That's like a high paying job, and you're earning all the money in the world. Now that's considered nothing, especially living in London. And it's like you're. I was in that school. I was really like, I loved it. It was a lovely school, St. Barnabas Primary School, and everyone was like, I wasn't like Captain Popular, but I was really content. So social circles are developing. I was like talking to everybody, and it's really weird, like remembering all that, because everyone wanted to be my friend, and we were going on school trips, and it was like people wanted to be like near me, and it was such a really cool feeling. And then my mom got hurt at work. Long story short, it sounds comical when you put it like this. She fell off a chair, and that caused health problems that still persist to this very day. And it's wild how that can swerve everything in your life, right? So she no longer had the job in that part of the city anymore. So then I had to be at a different school, and I knew I was leaving. I was told I was leaving. I really wasn't happy that I was leaving. That school was incredible. It was one of those schools where people thought it was a private school, but it wasn't. It really wasn't. And my sister was in the same school. She was in year 6, and when I was in year 1, and it was cool because like I'll see my sister at lunchtime and be like, "That's my sister, haha," and things like that. And on like, you know, the day we're leaving, the teacher, I remember this super well. The teacher's like, "We're never gonna." And funny enough, at that time, my name was one of my 6 different names. My name was Kalen. My name was Kalen at that time. So
Uh,
I went by another completely different name. And yeah, it was really like sad, and like kids were crying, and I was like, "Oh my god, people like me here." And then the next school I went to was called Southwold, and I lasted 4 months there. I hated it. It was terrible. It was dark, like literally and figuratively just dark. The school looked like a prison. It I had no social groups. No one really wanted to be my friend, and it's the first time I got the insult that follows me around. Why do you talk like that? Um, which is weird because I only get it now from people who are of a certain demographic, and those people are very like inner city. And when I say that, I don't mean black. Don't get me wrong. I mean people who are literally just from the inner city of London, Hackney, South London, because they think I should be speaking similar to them, but I don't. And that's when I first got it, and lots of kids were like laughing at me, being like, "Oh, what? Why do you talk like that? Why are you using those words?" And it's like, okay, cool. And then from there, I went to there was another school in between that. Um, I didn't last long with that school either. I didn't last long there. And then I went to St. John of Jerusalem, which is a school like I got about a good 45 minutes. No,
I,
like
I,
a
I,
good
I know that school.
10-minute walk.
I know that school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10-minute walk from my house. And that is where I met Toga, who we referenced in the first introduction episode. Toga is like similar to Joe, one of my long-term friends. Been there forever. Spent New Year's with him, and that school wasn't bad, but I didn't feel like I belonged. I was like a victim of bullying there. I struggled. I took time. I went to America in that time. I came back, and I was at the age like year 3, I think year 3 or 4. I was at the age in which like it was super impressionable. So when I went to America for like a month and a half, I came back with an American accent because that's what happens when you're that age. All my cousins are speaking an American accent, so naturally I picked it up because that's what happens when you're at those age. If I had cousins in Spain, I would have come out with a Spanish accent. Um, and that American accent kept with me until I was legitimately like 23 years old. um, it's wild, but I could never settle at that school. I just couldn't settle. And time again, I struggled to just acclimatize in different social scenarios, and it felt like every single time there was a reason why like I just couldn't hit my quote unquote potential. Like academically, everyone went, "You're really smart. Why isn't he producing?" Like he knows everything. He just can't get it down on exams. He can't do his timetables. And it was just a lot. So I left that school. I went to a different school called Gayhurst, which is where I met, my core group of friends who I still talk to now, like Ben, Casey, Harry, and from there I met another group of friends who I'm seeing later on today to play football. Like Gayhurst was good. It was good. There was minimal trouble, but there was a clear like dissociation with me from academic potential to social potential. It was clear that I didn't really connect in the same way. And it was like, oh, okay, I don't know what to do here. A lot of social situations where I just didn't really function well. And exams were really stressful. I didn't realize what exams really were until then. I remember taking my science exam, and I remember knowing the answer to a multiple choice question and then going, I don't know how I know the answer. So then I just broke. And that's when I realized, oh, I think there's something wrong with me. But then I pushed it to the back because at the time, like my mom had inklings, but similar to your mum, Joe. Very extreme. Like, oh, ADHD means he's gonna be put on a list and he's never gonna get a job and he's never gonna go to university, he's never gonna do this, he's never gonna do that, and he's gonna like end up alone and die in a hole, and he's gonna be addicted to drugs. And I shit you not, like, to people listening to this and to you, Joe, that was like the main thing. If you have ADHD, if you have autism at the time, you are on the downward road. You're going to hell. There's no redemption arc for you. So there was I say a proper big effort to keep that away from me. So I struggled in my sats. I think the marking system was like out of 5, out of 4. What was it? Do you remember?
Oh, what sats?
Yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, I actually don't know if this is it still true that they have levels the way we used to.
I don't know actually. I
It,
never touched that stuff in when I was working in primary school. I'm only secondary.
yeah, we have kind of like different grading systems for like every single key stage, as it's called, in the UK, and that each of those have changed over time, so that we're like by the time we left, things had started changing. So now they use numbers, for example, as grades in the GCSEs rather,
Yeah,
which is our
but
like
what was it? But what was it?
you know
I
it was
don't
at
care
it,
about
I
now.
think
I care
5A.
now.
I think 5A was like the highest, I believe, if I remember
There we
correctly.
go. Yeah. So like I
Yeah.
got like in English I was like easy 5A, boom. Everyone was like, yeah, sure. Maths I was like 3B or 3C or something like that. And then like I think science I was like 3C, and everyone was like, oh my god, like he's failed. And there was a lot of like, how have you failed? The only subject I'm ever really been good at is English. I I love reading. I love writing. I love all the things to do with the English language when I can be free to explore it. So I think teaching is really important for this example. If you don't teach something well and kids don't enjoy it, they'll hate it forever. So I've been taught Shakespeare 6 different times. I hate Shakespeare.
Oh yeah.
Um, However, now being a poet, I'm like, I could appreciate this guy's work. I will never
Mm.
like it because it's been taught horrifically, but I really like it. However, well, not I really like it. However, I really appreciate it. Of Mice and Men is my favorite book. Why? It was taught really well. I read it once when I was an adult, and I found the hidden meanings behind it. In my exams, I was able to write freely in secondary school. So the creative writing exam, the English literature exam surrounding like Curly's behavior, I was able to write and express myself on that, and that, like, I think that secured me my good grade at GCSE level. But going back to primary school, I know that's where we are. I deviate. Apologies.
No, yes, we deviate, and that's the point of this. We just
Yeah, social dynamics in primary school is very difficult, and I really couldn't be. I didn't have like a set group, and the groups I did have, I struggled to feel a part of, and it was very, very, very emotional, and it felt like I just wasn't belonging there. So leaving primary school was a bittersweet experience because now we're moving into early secondary school, and that was the transition to that was difficult because yeah. Should we continue into primary school? Are we into secondary school?
I no, I think I want to continue on talking about primary school generally, but
Yeah,
I am curious about this. Did you go? You didn't go straight to Hackney Free at the time, right?
I didn't know. I bounced around.
Yeah. So Hackney Free, as it was called, it's now called a different name by a different name. Um, was the secondary school that we went to, and I was there for I think how long was it before you came? Because
I
in my
showed
mind
up
it's like
the
a
end
while.
of year 7.
Yeah, okay, so I am right. Yeah, it was like near the end of year, so like 6 months or something into the year, which is about 9 months long. Um, is how I remember it. or how I think of it, like 6 or 7 months in, you were like the new kid in the form, and I I genuinely want to tell you that at the time, because I had like there's a whole system of like choosing your secondary school and things like that, and it's kind of more so like given to you, if that makes sense. It's just sort of and there's like a system of like of like ranking, and then it depends on how far away they are and whether you have siblings there and other sorts of things. Since I'm the oldest, there was no specific bias, but this is like a very close secondary school to me. It
Yeah.
was also one of the it wasn't a school with a good reputation. Let's
A
just put it
terrible
that way.
reputation. The worst.
Yeah, and I even looked up a few years ago for the Wikipedia on the article around the school, and it turns out that like I didn't realize this, but we were like the top 5 most disenfranchised school in the UK or something like that.
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
you
yeah.
know this? I was
So
shocked by that, like finding
like
that out.
I should have probably been a Hackney free from the get go. Um,
Mm.
so effectively the same thing. You can rank your top 3. I chose my first one was my first choice was a school called Sir John Cass. I didn't want to go there. My sister went there, and like, she's pretty much might as well call her the valedictorian of the whole school. Like the pictures of her everywhere. If I walk in there now, they'll be like, "Oh my god, you look like her. You are her." Oh.
Oh,
Like like
I completely
and
forgot about Sir John Cass, by the way. I completely
yeah, yeah,
forgot
yeah.
about that school.
Like I so it was a difficult experience, and I know primary education is like the core thing we're talking about here, but I feel like it's important that we give this context. I went to that school. It wasn't my first choice. It was my mum's and my sister's first choice because I went there. You should go there. I just was never going to connect there. The school was mostly like a very like a Middle Eastern population or like an Asian population. That's fine.
Hmm.
A-okay. What isn't fine is the fact that those schools have very like like most schools, the cliques are there, but they're stronger because there's a language barrier as well. So then now people who speak English perfectly fine, they didn't speak English, and they will say things about you, and you wouldn't know. Fine, it is what it is. These things happen. My class especially, no one really like looked to get to know me or like me. I was one of, I think, was he in my class? I was one of 2 black kids in a class of 30 something or 28 or something like that. I walked into school, and on like the side of my table is nigger, just scribbled onto the side of it, like big old letters. So I go, and at the time I've never like I'm not even saying like nigger. No, I mean hard R nigger. So I'm like, cool. So I go crying, and they go, "Oh, is this somebody playing a joke?" That's what it was. They never got it removed. I begged, I cried, never got it removed. And I was
So
openly called that a
stupid.
lot. I was openly called it a lot, and it is what it is. Like I was set up for failure effectively there. I like whenever I wasn't performing well, I wasn't like concentrating, whatever. Your sister did really well in the school, and you're not doing well. I remember the head teacher dragged me out of the class, and he held me by like my wrist, and he showed me like my sister's name on a plaque. It was like, this is the standard you need to be reaching. And in my head at the time, I was thinking, absolutely not. like, like I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. like, like
Mm.
then, like, because I knew there was something up with me, but no one else wanted to know. So I was like, okay, cool. And I remember in the playground, we were playing football, and I was playing. I'm a decent footballer. I'm a really good goalkeeper. I was playing outfield, and I've always been a bigger human being. I literally won the ball back from this guy. I didn't use my body at all. He then tries to tackle me. He runs into the back of me and bounces off me and hits the floor. I I am like cool. And I wasn't tall either. I was 5'4". Like I was short. I've been short forever until now. Um, he gets upset and then punches me straight in the face. And like bust my nose, like my nose is like running blood. And he doesn't get in trouble. He doesn't get in trouble at all. He gets a telling off, and I get a detention, and he gets one as well. And then this has happened twice in my time. Once here, and once at Hackney Free. He came up to the boy, and the boy who punched said, "What's your name?" And he said his name. He goes, "That's a beautiful name. I love that name." I started speaking Arabic with him. And then the guy came over to me and was like, "Don't mess with him. I don't think you understand." I was like, don't try and. What he said, so I can't remember the full quote of what he said. He said something along the lines of, "Understand, like, that you can't bully people." So I was like, I don't belong here. And I cried. I begged my mom to take me out. About 3 months later, finally the trigger's pulled and I'm out of there. And then I show up in Hackney Free and I'm like, great, I have to do this whole I'm the new kid thing again. And I'm just like, and I walk in and like, I remember because I remember the first day I saw you and I was like, I hate everybody in this room. like, 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 I hate everybody in this room. And then I was like, wait a second, Toga's in this room. Oh, Toga. I'm like, wait, of course. I'm here because Toga's here. I'm here at Hackney Free because Toga's at the school, and that's like the main pull. No one wanted me to go to that school. Everyone's like, you're gonna get stabbed at that school, you're gonna die. How my goodness, Sir John Cass, take the racial abuse. If they're burning a cross in the back garden, that is better than you going Hackney Free. Okay? Like just, we'll put on the white hoods and join them. It's all good. Better than going to that school. I ended up at that school. And here we are.
Yeah.
I hated everybody except Toga. And then
Is that why you were in our fort?
yeah, pretty much.
Oh, I didn't realize that was exactly why you were in BNS.
Yeah, BNS, yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were like, okay, we need to help him settle, so put him in the form where he has a friend who's there. Which, in hindsight, great decision, because you were there too. But like,
well, I feel like that is just a good decision anyway. Do you disagree?
no, it was a great decision.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
These are decisions that I make now as like a coach. I'm like, I have a predominantly French-speaking team. I have players in my team who probably shouldn't really be in my team because they're a bit too young, but they're comfortable and they're happy. So join in, have fun.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna take away someone's comfort at the pursuit of results in something that in the long term probably won't matter. And in that regard, my comfort for once took paramount and people actually cared. So
Yeah.
until we get later on.
I would also I did cry when I found out I was going Hackney 3. It was my second rank. I don't know why it was second rank. It was outside of my control. I wanted to go to other schools. To be perfectly honest, like when I look back at everything, I as a when you're doing all of that, which by the way is that quite like a fundamentally difficult time in your life because you're also doing SATs, which is like the exams that kind of that it's like the first major exams you do. Like there are exams you do, sure, but they don't really have the weight that they seem to have at the time that you do SATs, which is just like a big, I don't know, it just feels like a much more official and bigger deal. So, and I actually can't even remember what SATs even are important now, apart from maybe just telling. I think it maybe just tells like the secondary school and that level of education, key stage 4, like what to expect of you, basically.
Well, that was the standard of acceptance. If your stats weren't good enough, you wouldn't be able to go to certain schools. So, like,
okay,
a
I
lot
actually wasn't.
a lot of pressure is put on that. That's why, like, everyone was really upset when I got threes in maths and science because, like, oh, he might not get into Sir John Cass anymore. And then,
Oh yeah, okay, I hate that shit. I hate that shit with a passion. By the way,
yeah, the loophole was literally just like, oh, his sister's there, so it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
that's literally how, like, nepotism got me in. The only time nepotism probably helped me ever. Um, and look at that, it helped me so much that I got punched in the face for it, Joe. like, hey, nepo baby. Like,
Yeah, no, but I was not looking. I certainly was not looking forward to 83. In hindsight, I realized it probably. I was actually happy not to go to my first rank, which was Mossborn. Not that there's anything like directly wrong with Mossborn, but it's just I don't think it was what I. I mean, there's very little you have to go off of, and you're basing it off of like those little school things you go, like the school things where like you go to classes and then there's like students there talking about stuff. Or it's very like formative, right? And it's you don't really know what it's going to be like and stuff. I mean, my brother went to um what's it
the
called?
academy, isn't it?
City Academy, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not saying like I can't remember exactly why he went, but like in with respect to that place, it's a fucking academy, and there's so much shit that academies get away with doing, and so many more like rules that they stipulate on children unnecessarily at academies, which I think is just stupid and arbitrary and
Yeah,
is actively harmful to people.
yeah.
For my brother, it wasn't like the end of the world, but like I think for someone like me or for someone like you, it probably would have been a lot worse. And it's a weird thing. Like, again, not going too much into the education system as a whole, both because I don't really know much about it. Alex does a lot more than I do. But at the end of the day, like just to bring it back, the point was that like that kind of period of time is a very difficult one, and I remember being very confused and very frustrated throughout their entire experience, and then like finding out, okay, I'm going to the school that I really don't want to go to, has all this reputation. And again, there's so much like reputation about schools and things like that. It's so stupid and
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
like problematic, I think, for like young people.
Well, like,
I
there's like pre-entrance exams. Remember that you had
mm,
those as well.
I
Like, for,
do I do remember those, although some of those are about like some of those are about putting students into strata, and then basically there's like I think there's rules to prevent like a school from only taking people of a certain strata and up. So people that like go to those exams are essentially put into like categories of strata of like of performance, and
well, like,
so they have to take like a certain amount from each one or something like that. So
you wouldn't. What would happen is there was like pre-entry exams, and you would just get turned away from some of them. Like academies were kind of a law unto themselves at a certain point. So it was like very much a oh, you like as you said, like the strata system and things like that. Like I ended up going to Petchy Academy and I left Hackney Free. Um, for the similar reasons, really. Similar reasons. Like I had undiagnosed ADHD. I was set up to fail. Like, um,
mm,
and it's like, oh, by who? By everybody. Oh, you make yourself a victim? Yes, yes, I am. Like, there's not much I can really more I can say. Like, if if everyone around you decides to willfully ignore the obvious symptoms and signs because of a stigma, I'm gonna say I was set up to fail there. Like, this is why like we talk about this stuff because it's a difficult situation to be in.
mm,
I went to Petchy Academy and they're like, oh, but is he gonna have to do the entrance exam? And again, luckily I didn't have to because I can talk really well. So everyone, I will sell people the dream of me being like a hyper intelligent person, and then I would walk the talk up until it got to like the heavy curriculum based stuff, like a classroom structure. So
mm.
I can explain why this book is impactful and why the reader will enjoy certain bits verbally, and I can write it, but I can't write it in a booklet with AQA exam board on it.
Right.
Like there's no, for me, academic accomplishment is not measured well in no country. In no country is it measured well, especially if you're neurodivergent of any sort, because you're set up just to fail. Because we're expecting kids of variety of different ages to be standardized in how their brain works. Like how it's. you have children, and you have family members, Joe, who are significantly younger than you, and you see the way that they act. They're all different. So imagine getting them all to do the same thing that they don't want to do. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like kids tend to not enjoy the hard parts of school, like exams. Why? Because they're stressful, and because there's consequence to not doing well. And oh, but that should make kids tough. It doesn't, though. What makes kids tough is a challenge that yields a good reward. Like a good reward of going into a harder class because you're doing well at something isn't a good reward. There's no incentive. It's and also it's very like in your face. Like, oh, these kids are struggling, so they're in this group, and then like those kids that get bullied. Like all the time, like kids used to get bullied for being in like a lower group for certain subjects. Like I remember a kid when I was in Hackney Free Review, was like, "Oh yeah, you're in like set 4 for maths." I was like, "Okay, I'm in set 1." I remember because the kid was like, "I'm in set 1." Like Joe's in my class, and I was like nigga, like that it ain't that big. Like, you know, what set you in for English? Set 1. Joe's in my class.
I mean, yet again, an element that never that didn't leave primary school was the I was known as the smart kid, to my dismay, and apparently to many others, as as you had to experience, as
Like it's
people
not
randomly use it.
like because like it's weird because you have that relationship with being the smart kid, but I have a relationship with you based off of you being the smart kid, which is really we've never actually spoken about this. Jesus, like
Mm.
so my whole academic time at Hackney Free was compared to you by everybody,
But
which is
that's what
quite
everyone did to
no,
themselves.
but no,
To
no,
be fair,
but not in like the normal. Joe's really smart. No, I should be like that. I mean, like I had Mr. Bennett come in and be like, "This is what Joe's doing. This is what you're doing. You can do what Joe's doing, but you're not." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And then like my mom would be like, "This is what Joe's doing. You're always around his house, but you're not like getting the same results as he is." I'm like, "How do you know what Joe's doing?" Like we spend I think 3 out of the 5 weekdays watching Two and a Half Men eating chips post post school, like or watching Scrubs.
yeah.
I push Will and Grace,
I
like
don't remember Will and Grace ever,
you
but
know,
I would take your word for it. At some point, Will and Grace appeared on screen.
yeah, like we wouldn't actually watch Will and Grace, but it'll show up, and I'll watch it more than you. Like so there was the idea that oh well, if Joe's doing this, then you can also do this. But there was never the idea of maybe they're just different people. And
Yes.
maybe like to this day, for example, I know that if I throw like a times table like booklet at you and be like, do this, you'll get it done just like that. Why? Because you're a smart motherfucker. But I also know that if you say, oh, write me a poem about I'm looking around my little fake studio here about well there we go. About how, you know, the cat is asleep but always has one eye open. I can do that just like that. Why? Because I'm half decent at that.
Mm.
But at the time, it was like, no, you guys to be the same. Be the same and act the same. And I'm like, in therapy, I discussed it briefly. And the reason why I discussed briefly because there's literally nothing like bad to it. I hated you for like a minute and a half. And then I realized at the young age that it was like, no, 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 no. I'm hating the player, but I should really be hating the game. Like,
Nice.
straight up. Because the same thing. Like, oh, 'cause I remember we had like me and you we had our friend Marlando as well. Shout out to Marlando wherever you are. Like, and the same like, but I would never compare to him. And I was like, okay, cool. Is that because we had similar grades and that was expected? So it's like you're trying to push somebody else's expectations onto me and make them my expectations. Maybe we're just not the same. Maybe you need to change my expectations and adjust it so that what I'm hitting at, I can exceed that to my own level, not Joe's. Because if you want me to get an A star in maths like Joe, then Jesus Christ, I guess I'm no longer agnostic. He's real. Because that is literally what it's going to take for me to get an A star in maths. Like, it's not happening. I'm not good at mathematics. Like, you know, but if you want me to get an A star in maths,
Mm.
man, shit, nigga, why didn't you just tell me? Like, you know, we can work on it.
Yeah, it's weird because I've never really spoken with you about this. It's true, but what's funny is that what you're describing is something I was frustrated by in primary school. So literally, my and I actually like put a lot of the thought process of how I tended to feel about myself, how I tended to value myself, how I tended to see um my uh like my like to see my personal sense of self um came very much through school, and specifically how I did at school and stuff like that. Keep in mind as well, because of the nature of like the lack of social stuff that was happening around like year 3 and onwards, I was having very little to no interaction with people outside of school. So like what I was doing in year 7 with you and like Kestis and the rest was all like, you know, from year 7, year 8, year 9, all of that stuff. That was all like new to me. Like genuinely what was happening in year 7 was a completely new experience I had never engaged in. And it was really exciting, like genuinely exciting for me. And it was something that had never been tested. So in many ways, like there were things that came up. Like I realized looking back how socially inept in certain ways I was. Like I literally found myself like amongst the friend group of like Kessis and Montel and other sorts of people, um, Mickey and Moomin and many others. Um, a lot of that actually came from weirdly having like an oddly encyclopedic knowledge of the fifth generation. Wait, is it fifth generation? Fourth generation of Pokemon. Uh, because I overheard, because they are a year above us. They were a year above us. So I overheard a conversation when they were just like nearby. I think we were like lining up for form or something like that. And they were there. And I just, because I think they were at Mr. Finley's room. Do you remember the old building, like where we were
Yeah,
and then where
yeah,
Mr.
yeah, yeah.
Finley's room was? So I think that was their form tutor, I think, at one point. I might be wrong, but I just remember them like being nearby, and like there was, and they were talking about Pokemon, and I was like, I know about Pokemon, and so I just went in there, and then, or I think one of them like asked a question about something, and I remember talking about it, and I remember I literally became a person who knew like what point did Piplup evolve and Empoleon and Primplup evolve and blah 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 and stuff like that, stuff that I had picked up from reading my cousin's like game stuff that he had. Um, it, and this translated into a social friend group, which then became obviously much more than that, and I became not just the as you would say it, like the smart kid or whatever in that context, but that is very much how I have been, and I would say have like always thought about myself, because even up to like, even before, like, even in year 4, I think I remember in year 4, like, starting to notice this. People would start to make comments because I was genuinely, and this is not to like toot my own horn or anything, but I was genuinely dominating subjects overall. Like that was just a general truth that seemed to be the case. I've generally done well in school. Um, Whatever the reason is, and by the way, this was always true. This isn't start being true as I got depressed. Depression doesn't make you suddenly good at academics or whatever. Really does not. In fact, I would say that over the course of those years, I noticed a decline in my abilities. Like by the time I got to year 6, I was very self-introspective in this, so I am quite sure that I'm correct in this, in this assessment. Like really minor things about like memory and stuff, I realized I was actually performing worse in. Um, I but I became this person, and I realized that I was actually being, the thing you mentioned before, where it's like, oh, but I'm in Joe's set, like that stuff was like that sets already exist in primary school, at least it didn't in mine. But like the idea of like comparison was made regularly, and anyone who seemed to like, if there was like a question that most people, like if there was a question I got wrong for whatever reason, like for whatever the reason might be, and someone else got right, it became like a trophy. Like
Yeah,
there were
I remember this.
there were and again, this was true for years before I even met you. Like this was something that was known to me, and it became a weirdly like that. There was even one time, I think, like year after year for a period of time, we would have like a sort of millionaire style trivia quiz thing for like young people, where they would use like a program which had questions on it to generate. Or I think there was one year which was specifically about planets, which they made. And I remember there was one year where I knew the answer and I chose to get it wrong, so that Venetia, who was a girl who was incredibly smart, and we used to talk about Doctor Who all the time, um, would win because I hated winning. And like, and I again, I don't mean that to be like a narcissistic point to make, but like I genuinely started to like have a complex about like if I about like if about really small in small ways, if I started failing in small ways, I would have to defend that I was not failing, and that no one could catch me on this, um and that I had to like and that like that I was never wrong, that no one was allowed to like yeah, like I said, no one was allowed to see that that I was vulnerable, that I was just a normal human being that could get things wrong, and that I was someone who like I had to make up an excuse, or there had to be some level of like, there had to be some explanation as to why the universe didn't correctly in my mind like come to a point that I was like accurate on something. And it that the fact that that kept going shows how much of the, not necessarily even like I wouldn't necessarily say it was something that was organically generated either. I don't quite know how this came to be. I don't mean like my complex, but like the atmosphere that bred that complex. Um, like whether that was partly due to the way that like schooling looks at grades and pushes these sort of like avenues of not like understanding things and having fun and enjoyment in understanding, but just getting things right. But I very much like formed this level of I formed these issues very much out of the mire of like just absolutely not wanting to fail. And then I can remember occasions where I even brought this up in class during specific times. I would say like, I don't understand, why is it that like why is it you feel bad if I'm doing well and you're not? But if you're doing well and I'm doing well, you still feel bad. But if I'm doing bad, then you feel good when you're doing well. Like it wasn't until someone, I'm not explaining it very well. What I mean is that it wasn't until someone felt that they were at my level or I was below their level that they felt good, which is bad for so many reasons. Because it's bad because it means that the good things they were doing were complete, they would ignore themselves. And it meant that when I did well, it was viewed as the norm. I was a control group. I was the neutral. There was no such thing as like oh, I'm doing well. Hey, well done, Joe. It was like you're doing what you should be doing.
Yeah, I see
And
expectations.
yeah, the expectation was I would do well. And and grades followed in with that completely. There was not a single subject where I didn't come 5A as expected. For like, I think, to be honest, at SAS, I think it's like maths, English, science, for example. I think really that's all it is. And and while I did do that well, and I even did, and again, it wasn't that I wasn't achieving in many ways, but like, I think this steadily became more and more of a problem. But one of the big things that I think, and this I genuinely think is something to take away and is quite important in understanding mental health, especially in young people, around education specifically, is the fact of how like is suddenly how the expectation causing these issues in me. Oh God, I'm losing the thread suddenly. I had like an idea and now it's gone.
Oh,
Fucking hell. This is what happens when you have too much in your head at once. I Oh God, what was it? You might want to make a note just saying this is where Joe tries to remember shit. Give me a sec while I try to remember. It was a good point, and but it was very specific. Let's think back.
I would say while you're having to think, I would say like there was a lot. What you said is very much valid. There was a lot of just like I remember we had like a pop quiz thing, like similar to what you mentioned, but we had it in which I think it was RE. We had it in, and just we had a general knowledge quiz, and the kid. Do you remember Jamal?
Yes, I
Like,
do,
yeah.
Jamal. Yeah.
So I was like in a general knowledge quiz. I absolutely kill. So we had tables. It was boys v girls, and the boys were at the back of one table, and the girls in the front of one table, and I carried the boys' team like literally every question. This is me bragging. Yes, it is. And we won. It was a slaughterhouse. Like, what is the tower in Pisa known as? The Leaning Tower. Jamal was massaging my brain. He was like, "You're like a Black Joe," and I was like, "Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it." You know? Like, I cannot even like. And the thing is
Okay.
that I look back on it and I go, and this all came about because I said, "Hey, like you're meant to be the smart one." Like earlier on today, before we start recording, and you're not, and it's good. Like the idea of perfection was literally someone who is imperfect, and I think that there's a lot of beauty in that because it shows like how people's eyes can create a picture or something that just isn't there. Like imagine if there wasn't that pressure that was put upon you by teachers, which was then put upon you by students, which was then put upon you by like everybody else around you. Like you'll feel so much more free. You'll feel more expressive in yourself. But you have that pressure put upon you to maintain a high standard that, like, in reality, you could never reach because it wasn't your standard. It was a made up standard. It's like, how shit is that? Like, for
And
you and then for everybody else.
it's also just completely ignoring like the kind of the benefit of learning anything. Like it completely ignores like why you want to learn, like why anyone would want to learn anything. It just chooses to like say knowing things is good, but that's it. Like it's the analogy I would have. I was thinking. I thought about this like right at the beginning of the podcast. Like, it's kind of like it's weird, but like we played like RPGs and games and things like that, right?
Yeah.
There's like the idea of like earning experience to get levels and stuff like that, which to us can be quite satisfying as players because there's a sense of like um achievement and or like goals and kind of like reaching points that feel like new avenues. But it's like imagine trying to explain to the character that you're playing as why it's worth killing like a bunch of boars or why it's worth doing this like weird fetch quest, like to like try to explain to them and like convince them to want to do the quest because what's in it for them for you to gain this experience
Yeah.
of like them, like it's so weird. It's almost like it's like you're not actually, you don't care about your character. Like your character is like getting more powerful for you, essentially. But like the idea of like a character doing something is like, and that's the idea of role play, I guess, and whatever. Like you're imagining the character does care, but like the idea of like if you just took like an actual human being is not like that. So it's almost like the school system kind of puts like kids in a situation where it's like, we know where you can end up, and we want you to feel, and we want you to get to level 60, but we can't explain to you why any of that's important.
Yeah.
And it's like, and we
Get
we
there.
don't want to motivate you towards that either. We just want you to do things, and we want to see level ups, which to them is just, or to society at large, I should say, is just like tick boxes
Yeah.
and grades and things like that. And to an actual person doing the, if I'm grinding out experience for like to fucking level up, I want to feel like the reason I want to grind the experience. And the funny thing is that if you want to do it, you do it better. Like if you like something, or you can be explained, it can be explained to you why something is good, then you're going to want to enjoy it. So I did,
Yeah.
by the way, remember what my initial point was earlier. So I will now come back to that if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. So my point was going to be, and this is a larger point also about autism, but I also want to say it's a larger point about behavior in younger people, certainly in primary school, is that if you are someone who is doing well, and if you are someone who is not causing problems, you won't get picked up. And I think that one of the big reasons why my mum truly never got round to, I think why, even though there were elements that existed, and my mum's friend like worked with kids with autism and things like that, and she like would say things once in a while, and she felt a certain way about how I was from a young age. But because it wasn't really harming my life, so to speak. I was suffering on the inside the entire time, but because it wasn't harming my grades or harming my like the appearance of like all that time spent. Obviously, at home it wasn't great. Actually, there was a lot of like friction, but that friction was not necessarily something that could be tied directly to autism and things like that. Or I mean, I can't say it is directly related to autism, but obviously having like not a very good social experience meant that I wasn't like going to, I wasn't going to do well at home either, right? Um, and there was going to be issues, throughout my life. But like the fact that that never came up, and the fact that there was never enough like kind of pressure from other places to figure out what was going on, meant that despite the fact that I was doing well, there was never they weren't going to come and be like, oh, Joe might actually like have this thing that we are aware of, or whatever. Like, or hey, maybe there's something we can do to help Joe in this way. Or hey, Joe, are you not happy at school? Because I was doing well, because I was enjoying enough of like the educational side of things, despite the fact that I hated school. Also, I was just very good at like, I guess emotionally lying about how I feel. Um, like I became almost a pathological liar to a sense. Like when I mentioned earlier about like vulnerability and like not appearing and like not appearing weak or stupid or like just not knowing things, like that's all part of that whole process of me just, of me masking, essentially learning how to mask, and essentially just becoming this like, yep, there's nothing wrong with me. Why would there be something wrong with me? You're wrong. Like, things like that.
Yeah. Like
And
the idea that you have to be perfect.
even though I would express the reality that I wasn't in ways that I couldn't have like quite foreseen at the time would express it, like that stuff just never got picked up because the numbers were good. And
Yeah.
I do think that's a genuine problem. Like, to be clear, I don't think that that means like, oh, let's pay special attention to the kids who do really poorly and who do really well. No, I think we should pay attention to all children. But the point is that if you're not doing really badly, or like if I started slipping like really quickly, maybe one of the teachers would have been like, actually, no, maybe there's something that needs to be done here. But that never happened. So they never like started that. That never came up. Or if I had like been maybe a bit more emotionally open, I might have said something about how horrible I felt, and maybe I would, and like both, whether it was to my parents or whether it was to the school, uh, and things like that. Maybe that would have been a more open conversation, but I wasn't going to admit that. That to me was an example of me being weak, but in part because also I my concept at the time of like, not doing well in certain ways was literally an example that I was doing something wrong, not that there was maybe something different about the way my brain worked, or that the environment wasn't great, or that actually people were being kind of shit to me or whatever, even if they didn't realize it. Like I don't blame any of the kids at my school for how they were, apart from the bullies that I did have in earlier years. They absolutely were pieces of shit in my mind. But again, they were also kids, so they're stupid and they don't realize
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing sometimes. But like they, those are the things I referenced earlier that I don't quite want to talk about because I think there'll be a better time for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like but there's very much this lack of focus on those things. I think that is technically in certain institutions becoming better. But like, for example, quick aside, but I think this is actually quite relevant. My niece, uh, who has been at it's a satellite school to a school for
Yeah.
people who are neurodivergent, and she hasn't always been there. She wasn't there for a long time, and she started having very similar things to me like when I started hearing about these things, it was quite a dark calling, like talk about death and like very young age. We're talking about 7 years old, right? Now imagine my niece, 7 years old, and I'm hearing about the fact that she's mentioning how sometimes she wants to die and things like that, which I remember those conversations I had, and like me looking out the window and thinking, oh, what would it be like if I just threw myself out the window? And not in a like just purely curious way, like in a very like, that would be a thing, wouldn't it? And
Yeah.
like the only reason, and I remember I stopped very specifically thinking about that because I like cut that off in my brain at one point, and that came back later on when I was in uni. It took that long before it came back, but it was something I cut off specifically because at the time I rationalized that I couldn't because everyone else would be sad that I was dead. So therefore, everyone would be upset if I died. So therefore, that was a reason not to. Um, but like that was a rationalization that kept me going for quite a long time, despite how much anger and frustration I was in. And I don't know exactly why or how it came back. I guess maybe the lack of those people being around me suddenly, like a new place and a new, and being completely out of my like wheelhouse or comfort zone or whatever, like maybe did it. But either way, like you know but like when I started hearing about this shit, it really set me back to those moments when I was young. And she has also been diagnosed with autism, and actually I would say that I think her autism affects her more as from a social perspective than it does me. um uh and I am so glad that both her nan is someone who's worked with kids with autism and different I actually don't know what the correct term is now for kids that have like behavioral
SEN.
disorders, or
Special
SEN,
educational needs.
special educational needs. There you go. Of like various kinds for many years, and that the only reason why this sort of stuff was being picked up was because of how communicative they were being with their child, specifically how often my niece was being asked to open up emotionally, and like from a very young age. Like she started talking from a very young age because they genuinely were like making her do it. And if it wasn't for that, I really think that there could have been a second version of like in history, if you think that like that way, of me with
Yeah.
her, where that happened. But it might have even been worse for her because she was experiencing the social problems earlier than I was. And it was just
Yeah.
becoming more and more apparent around the same time that I started getting depression, that she essentially was having symptoms of depression in exactly the same way. So, but she's now at a satellite school, and she has been, she's 11, she's going to be 11 this year. She's 10. I've never seen her happier than in the last few years while she's been at this school.
Yeah, because
And she's
those are
going,
schools built for that. The schools built
yeah,
to cater to needs, and like I kind of wish that we could have every school like a SEN school where it's like smaller
yes.
classes. But I know that the sustainability of it isn't there. For example, I went to TA at a school, at a secondary school. Like I went there and I was like, this is for minor learning difficulties, so MLD or mild, I guess will be. So I I looked and I was like, these are kids who all have things that I have, like ADHD and like autism. Yes, their needs are way more pronounced than mine. Like it's really weird because again, as I said in the first episode we did, yeah, you wouldn't know I have autism unless I tell you.
Oh,
And
same, by
even
the way, because that is how
yeah,
most people, when I started talking about this, felt. I
yeah,
mean, even when I started talking about depression in secondary school, that was like no
yeah.
one believed that that was a thing I
Like
was
people,
experiencing.
I've had people say, "No, you're not," and just walk away. Um, and it's like because I don't look a certain way. Those kids stereotypically looked a certain way, but I was like, if I was sent to the school, I would have done so much better in school. I would have had a
Hmm.
completely different life. I probably would be more geared to do things at university because I've been in a more nourishing setting. And as we draw this episode to a close, like I think it's important that you know. Originally, I said maybe this episode isn't going to be right for like the teenagers watching this. I was like, well, maybe certain aspects, maybe not. Certain aspects will be. And we will sit down. We will do an episode more on secondary school and like the different social dynamics that exist in secondary school. 'Cause I do think it's important, especially for those of you who are entering secondary school, or just about to leave, or right bang in the middle of secondary school. But the key thing I really want to like push out is expectations and how we've both had expectations like pushed upon us,
Hmm.
and some of them were influenced by each other, and some were influenced by
As it
like
turns out.
yeah, and some of these were influenced like by social settings around us, and based off like a demographic. I haven't even touched. I've barely even like delved into the racial aspect of it all, like things like oh you speak a certain way, or like things like you don't act like a black person, things like that. I haven't even hit the surface of that stuff yet.
Yeah, which
Um,
was I meant to say at the time, but these are things I never was there was never mentioned to me because I'm white, I
yeah,
imagine, right? So
yeah, like so those episodes will come. I sent the first ever episode of like Silly Worlds, the one we did last week, to a few people, and the feedback I got was the first half an hour. You can like no one ever needs to listen to it, but everything after that is amazing. I had one friend. I had one friend in tears originally because of what you were talking about you having a late diagnosis, especially during COVID. And then I think I hit her with the PTSD talk, and then that sent her into overdrive. And I think that was I think I'm gonna take that as a win because
yeah,
she
sounds
said
good.
so. Because she said so. She said it's a win. Um, so when that's up on iTunes and on wherever you listen to your podcast, give it a listen. And I don't blame you if you skip halfway through. The first half an hour is me and Joe figuring out what we're doing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I chose
No.
not to delete it purely because you wouldn't know our names. like, like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
wouldn't know our
yeah.
names. You wouldn't know how we met, and this episode here wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, I listened
Um,
to it twice today and it's a fair criticism for
yeah,
whatever. Like and I don't mind that. Like
yeah.
that doesn't bother
It doesn't bother me at all. I'm really happy because things like this, like the way I view my life now is set up through my schooling experience, where if I fix something up, the whole thing's messed up. So like if I now for example, if I'm cooking something and I don't get the timing quite right, and maybe the pot is a little bit burned, I've ruined the whole thing. It's game over. Burn the house down. You know? That mentality is from school where like, oh, I didn't get the right grade I needed in maths. My whole school career is over, game over. Like, turn off the console.
it. Hmm.
It's time to die. That is like how it was. So that parlays over into how I live my life now, which isn't good. It's not good. So if you are someone who's watching this and maybe you've just left school and you're thinking, oh my God, my life's a failure. My whole life is one big failure. You're not. It's fine. You're figuring shit out. It's okay.
Yes. I
Like
think
I have, yeah,
sorry, I was going to say, I think a lot of stuff that we brought up today will come back. So if there's any like actual stuff that we like said but didn't quite like go into, there's no way this is going to come back because this is a
right.
very like obviously important element to it. I mean, when we start talking about secondary school, we're likely to talk about like some of the topics we've already discussed because a lot of it also just continued into secondary school.
Yeah, exactly
Um,
that. It's natural.
we just kind of wanted to do this partly because I didn't know so much about him and he didn't know so much about me in terms of the specifics of our primary school life. And also, it's probably quite useful to block it in this way and have a more like discrete, specific element that we're talking about within this very much larger topic that, you know, is a difficult one, right?
So yeah, Podbean, podcast host people, they have a limit. I'm currently on the free plan because I didn't want to upgrade to the first one right away. Cause I actually didn't know if we were going to actually do this consistently. We are, so I'm probably going to end up paying for the main one. But if not, if I decide not to, I'm going to split this into 2 parts possibly. However, as we close this podcast, because I'm meant to be I need to be somewhere which will take me 20 minutes to get to in 15 minutes. But guess what? I'm fast.
Run, boy, run.
Yeah, pretty much. Here's the thing, guys. This has been fun. This has been a really good episode. We're gonna keep doing this. When the first episode's up, you guys will know, hopefully, and then people can watch it properly. I'm never gonna tell you guys to leave a like or review or anything like that. I don't really, honestly, do what you feel needs to be done. We are gonna take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind, but most importantly, have a good day, evening, night. And if you're struggling to get to sleep, I recommend putting on a YouTube video that has no importance to your life at all and act like you're interested because eventually you fall asleep anyway. And that is Silly Whales.
What a
Anything?
weird outro.
Anything else to say? Do you want to?
What a weird outro. No, you need to get going. I love you very much. And everyone, I really hope the best for all of you. At the moment, things are going decently well for me right this moment. So we'll see how it continues. But yeah, that'll be a whole nother. We'll do episodes of stuff. So
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying this.
yeah, same here. This is not going to be a titled episode, by the way. It's just going to be a standalone episode. As I mentioned in the beginning, it's just going to be probably called something like School is School, right? Something stupid like that. And then we'll have like a normal episodic episode 2 will come out at some point. We'll probably record it this week. But yeah. Bye. Cool. See ya.
Bye, guys.